two volunteers to come up and just kind of hold these displays for me, please. I met Bernice Crutcher in April of 2004. Bernice, like most of the Imperial Avenue women, she has some personal issues. She battles mental health as well as addiction. About 2 years into our relationship, we kind of separated because, like I said, she had an addiction. It was overwhelming. But I still cared about her. And this particular day, June 18, 2006, to be exact, after we have a conversation, Bernice goes outside and she's approached by a man. The man asks her, "Do you get high? Do you turn dates?" Well, at that time, that's what Bernice did in order to support her habit. About 30 minutes later, he says, "I have a spot. Why don't you follow me?" He takes her down Falcon Alley. If you're familiar with Garden Valley, it runs parallel to Kinsman Avenue. But that particular alley is very isolated, and it leads to East 70th Street to an abandoned house. Once she saw the abandoned house, she said, "I'm not going in there." He forced her at blade point. And of course, while she was inside the house, he attacked her. Well, unbeknownst to us, 4 months after her case, CPD sex crime unit suspended her case. 8 months after that, Crystal Dozier, the first of the Imperial Avenue victim, disappeared.
Yes.
She was not found until 2.5 years later, November of 2009, at Anthony Sowell's home. At that point, with all the local media and the international media focusing on Anthony Sowell, that's when we realized this man that you see right here, this sketch, that appeared in the Plain Dealer on June 30th, 2006. Do you see a resemblance? This is my book cover, which I recently published. You can go to cdnewton.com. I'm going to pass out some business cards. And you can download the book for free. It's full of photographs, images, and even letters of communication between me and Mr. Sowell. Anthony Sowell was hiding in plain sight in June of 2006. All 11 of the Imperial Avenue women were still alive at that time. But as I mentioned, the sex crime unit suspended her case just 4 months later, and they never told us. And the reason why they did that was because they didn't get any DNA in CODIS to produce a suspect. But according to the sex crime manual, all sex cases or sex assault cases require a thorough investigation. They didn't do that. That's the sketch that Bernice Crutcher, who just sat down, provided to them. Mr. Sowell, as of September 7, 2005, was a registered sex offender 9 months earlier. So that means they had his photograph, his name, and his address on file. And he was less than 3 miles away from the abandoned house, as displayed in the article says, "Woman raped, beaten up in an empty house." Now, here you may find this is very fascinating. This particular house was located in the 6900 block of Kinsman Avenue. Do you know where Crystal Dozier lived? Within that same block. Crystal Dozier, the very first of the Imperial Avenue victims, and Bernice Crutcher were actually neighbors. So that means, had there been a thorough investigation, as they're required to do, those women would still be alive. Mr. Sowell was hiding in plain sight. Garden Valley was actually dress rehearsal before Imperial Avenue. Now, just to share with you some recent development and updates, I've been at City Hall and the prosecutor's office for years to reopen this case. Of course, they kept ignoring me and blowing me off. But recently, Michael McGrath, who was the former chief of police, who's now been promoted to safety director, and of course, you know, the mayor is running for election. So I sent him a letter as well. I said, this case needs to be reopened because Bernice Crutcher's jury is right among the Imperial Avenue victims jury. Here's a better photograph over here. This photograph here was taken by our county coroners. That's the jury they retrieved from Anthony Sowell's bedroom. That author in that photograph published the photograph. They wouldn't give it to me. But fortunately, and by some miracle, Bernice's watch, gray watch, and her ring is in that photograph. 2006, the 11 women of Imperial Avenue from 2007 to 2009. Now, to wrap this up, long story short, this is the call of action I'm asking for all the ladies present. Number one, go to cdnewton.com. There's an online petition. Sign it. Please sign it. So we can take those signatures to our prosecutor, Michael O'Malley, to give Bernice justice and closure, to have Mr. Sowell indicted and finally charged. Number two, once Sowell is actually convicted for this 2006 assault on Bernice Crutcher, that's now new evidence for the Imperial Avenue victim's family. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but their case in federal court was dismissed. That would never happen if they'd have known about this 2006 case. And once Mr. Sowell was indicted and charged, that's new evidence for their case to be reopened and for their families to receive the proper settlement that they deserve. Amen. But there's strength in numbers. This is where it starts. It'll be a domino effect. I see a hand in the back. Yes?
Do you have any contact with my daughter's girlfriend, with her mom was one of the victims, and they're still back and forth with the same issue, similar to this young lady. But it's like the victim's family, they just shoved it to the side. And she had reported her mom missing for months and then a year or more.
Well, that was typical of most of the families. But what makes Bernice Crutcher's case so unique, this was 1 year before the Imperial Avenue murders began. The press and the media, I've been leaning on them and sending them information. You need to share with the general public, especially their families, about her case. Because once it comes to light that her case was suspended after 4 months, and Mr. Sowell came back down to Garden Valley, and lured Crystal Dozier, the very first victim, to his home, he continued that 11 times. Now, by definition, what they did with Bernice Crutcher's case when they didn't get a hit in CODIS, it amounts to negligent homicide. 11 times over. And by law, for the Imperial Avenue victims, the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says, no U.S. citizen shall be deprived of life, liberty, and equal protection under the law. When they suspended this case after 4 months, the community was not being protected. Their attorneys can use her case as new evidence to get their lawsuit reopened. But it starts with, if you go to my website, cdnewton.com, you'll see in the menu where it says petition for Bernice Crutcher. C, as in cats, D for dog, Newton, N-E-W-T-O-N. As a matter of fact, I brought some business cards. They're over there. I'm going to pass this out. You can sign the petition, and once the prosecutors see we have enough support behind us, and of course, like I said, City Hall has recently said, you're not going away. And once I sent him this photograph, and the lower one with Bernice Crutcher wearing her jewelry that Mr. Sowell took from her months before it ended up in his bedroom. The first time I approached Michael McGrath, who was then the chief of police, about 5 years ago, he said, until we have physical evidence linking Mr. Sowell to her attack, then it's not going to go before the prosecutor. Well, I said, we now have that physical evidence. What are you waiting on? Because once the news released the fact that Mr. Sowell attacked her in 2006, that's 1 year before the Imperial Avenue tragedy began. Now you have new evidence. And this also helps the victims' families, their case. Because it clearly proves the sex crime unit did not follow their own protocol and procedure. A thorough investigation. They rolled the dice on POTUS. When they didn't get a hit from her rape kit, that's as far as it went. But that was a violation of the victim's family constitutional rights. Not to be deprived, number one, life, and equal protection under the law. And one law in particular, I'm going to say this right quickly. In 1996, then President Bill Clinton signed into law what was called Megan's Law. You know what that is? That requires that when a sexual predator moves into a community, the local government has to issue a notification. They didn't do that. No one in Imperial Avenue knew that Anthony Sowell, as of September 7, 2005, was a registered sex offender. They didn't know. Cleveland dropped the ball. Okay, I'm sorry, my brother. I see you have your hand up.
Why do you think that happened in the African American community?
Well,
Why,
basically,
and I'm gonna ask a really blunt question. Why do we allow it to continue to happen?
well, on the part of the civic leaders, just because of the indifference and bias towards our community, they feel as if we don't have political capital until election day.
Well, there's something else that I think. The last time we marched about anything, I think, well, I won't say that with you ladies, so y'all did something a little bit, was during civil rights. As soon as that was satisfied, I haven't seen us really stand for too much of anything when it comes to our community, and I think that's part of that reason. You're 100% right. I do know a lot of other people that said he should have been stopped a lot sooner than he was. But it was in an African American community where African Americans do not vote in lower elections. We came out in droves for President Obama, and we let this fool get in here because we would not go vote. So what he is talking about is a call to action.
Very much so. Thank you, my brother. And you're right.
I know I'm right. Because I'm
absolutely.
going to tell you something. I'm sorry, my name is Lawrence. I own this club here, okay? And one of the problems that we have in our African American communities is we don't know how to stand up for anything. We lay down for every other race. Look at who does your hair. Look at who does your nails. Look at who's at your corner stores. So it makes me angry. It does, because we allow it. We allow it.
Lawrence has a very good point. They figured after I sent so many letters and phone calls years ago that I would give up. Bernice's story actually appeared on the news in July 2011. And then the sex crime unit actually released a false statement saying that Bernice was mistaken. But years went by, and like I said, this author right here, Robert Saberna, he published the coroner's photograph. I'm going to tell you another interesting tidbit. Our former county prosecutor, William Mason, I said to him by letter in August of 2011, I said, it's a strong possibility Bernice Crusher's jury is among the Imperial Avenue victims. Do you know what he did? 4 months before his term was up, he stepped down. He resigned. Because he knew. There's only one way I would know that her jury was taken by her attacker, because it happened. It's true. I didn't know until this book came out months later that the coroner, like I said, by some grace of God, when they laid out an array of jury, hers would be there. And there's no doubt in my mind, if they test that watch and that ring and the other jury that they have, it'll prove. In 2006, Ms. Crutcher handed the sex crime unit Anthony Sowell. Here I have a caption on the bottom from another author that said, because he questioned the sex crime unit, he said, I've talked to Mr. Newton and Ms. Crutcher. This was in 2011. He said, are you sure that she's mistaken? Well, of course they said, yeah, they're mistaken. I'm so grateful to him. He said, well, when I look at that sketch that you all have long now forgotten, it looks very much like Sowell. And it's true. The resemblance there. To her best of her ability, because at that time she was traumatized, upset, that was him. So, cdnewton.com, you can go to the menu. Oh, another thing too, as a favor to me and Bernice, I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. My last post on Instagram sort of has a video, because I'm also creating a video book, a reenactment of everything that happened from that time to present. All my dealings with the sex crime unit, the mayor, the chief of police, Sowell, for about 6 months. Sowell and I was in communication. He didn't know who I was. And he said to me, Mr. Newton, you're efficient, and you're not very good at it, kind of cocky. But he said to me in the end, I don't need you, you need me. Because he knew he did it. He was never charged for it. So that's our story in a nutshell. We'll leave the exhibits up here if you want to take a look at it. I'll pass out some business cards. But cdnewton.com is the website. That's also where you find the petition. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at MrCDNewton.com. All one word, no period. MrCDNewton.com. Thanks for your time.